I'm going to begin with AASL Standard 1, Teaching for Learning. I've included two artifacts that I created over the past 2 years. These two artifacts really help me to understand how to plan, develop, implement, and evaluate teaching for learning in the school setting and in the library setting. The two artifacts are the Integrated Lesson Plan and the Mission Standards and Activities Alignment. I would like to begin with the Integrated Lesson Plan. The Integrated Lesson Plan was created in the fall of 2014 for the Library Science 5013 class. I was going to be the library media specialist, and the teacher that I was collaborating with was an 8th grade special education teacher. East Central Junior High is where I currently work as a 7th and 8th grade language arts teacher. And last year, during the first or second week of school, we lost one of our science teachers without notice. She quit. The science teacher had worked with my pod for approximately 2 weeks. And when she quit, the students were out of control. The principal was currently looking for a new science teacher, but had not found one yet. And for about a week after she had quit, the students were being given worksheets every day to keep them busy, to keep them, learning, but they weren't really learning. So for the integrated lesson plan, I decided to tackle a lesson for this class in conjunction with the special education teacher who was in that class on a daily basis, helping to manage the room and the students in that room and their IEPs. The science department head provided the sub with these worksheets titled Research Report and the List of Endangered Species. And the sub was supposed to have the kids use a laptop cart to fill out the research report on the endangered species of their choice. They were given no instruction on where to research, how to research, or what research really looked like. So this was the activity I decided to tackle and make better. So I started with the standard, Life Science Standard 1 and Life Science Standard 2, and I created 7 objectives with the help of the special education teacher. And these were objectives that were related to research. How do you research? How do you conduct scientific research? And how do you evaluate sources? That sort of thing. We started the lesson with a quick assessment, trying to figure out what do kids know about research? What is Boolean logic? Do they even know how to use a search engine? And what are endangered species? And that helped us determine prerequisite knowledge. We learned that they didn't really have a whole lot, so that's where we needed to start. And in the classroom, when we conducted this 5-day lesson, it would be in the science classroom. There would be 15 students. All of them were either on an IEP or an ELL. The substitute science teacher would be in the room as an extra resource, but she was really just kind of sitting back, not doing much. And then the special education teacher and I would take the lead on teaching this lesson. The special education teacher was going to be responsible for giving some background information, assigning topics, brainstorming, that sort of thing. And then I was going to mainly be the one responsible for teaching the research process. Now, we set up this lesson plan where I was doing a lot of the teaching because there wasn't a regular teacher. If I were to do this lesson again, I would not be the one that's primarily responsible for teaching the research process, demonstrating how to use a database. I feel like when I was teaching this lesson, I was doing a lot of the teaching, and the special education teacher was more of a resource. And I know that now, if I were to do it now, today, where we have a regular science teacher, I would want to be the resource, and I would want the teacher to really facilitate more of this teaching aspect. But we didn't have that as an option, so I took on the responsibility of teaching the research process. We provided them with some specific databases, and they also had some print worksheets as they were going through. Now, as I look back over this lesson, this integrated lesson assignment, a year after I created it, I see that it really addressed all 4 components of the Standard 1 Teaching for Learning. One major emphasis of the Teaching for Learning standard is that piece about inquiry-based learning. And I designed this lesson with an inquiry-based learning perspective, where students were expected to locate, use, and create new information about endangered species. I wasn't giving them the information, they had to find it. The special education teacher wasn't giving them the information, they had to find it. They had to do it, they had to think critically. And that was something that for at least 3 weeks, they had not been used to doing in science class. So it was a real switch and a real change for them. That was kind of a struggle at the beginning. But once they were able to get in there and they were seeing that this was meaningful, they really got on board. And there was some real good learning happening during this lesson. So we start with 1.1, the knowledge of learners and learning. At the start of the lesson, it was necessary to identify specifically what students did and did not know. As I stated earlier, we accomplished this with this pre-assessment. At this point, the special education teacher and I determined that students had heard the term endangered species, but they didn't really understand what it meant. They didn't have any knowledge on animals listed as endangered. And so from here, we designed a lesson beginning with endangered species and progressing them through what that means in their own research. The end goal was for students to identify why an animal was on the endangered species list and any current conservation efforts being made. So that was the goal. But we first addressed knowledge of learners and learning with that pre-assessment. And at the end of the project, we assessed their learning by looking at their Prezi, which is what they created at the very end on the 5th day. They didn't just present it, or they didn't just create it, but they actually presented it to their class. So we could really see what they learned from the experience. We also worked with this assignment on Standard 1.2, which is Effective and Knowledgeable Teacher. The class in which this lesson was taught consisted of 16 students. All 16 students required accommodations because they qualified for ELL or IEP services. Prior to teaching this lesson, I took the class roster and met with the special education teacher and the ELL teacher to identify student-specific accommodations. Now, I already knew some things about these students in regards to their accommodations because I had them in my own language arts class. But I spoke with the special education teacher and the ELL teacher to ascertain if there was any specific modifications for science class that had to do with mathematics and calculations that would have been different from a language arts class. Excuse me. When designing the lesson, I extended the time that I would typically use to teach this lesson to accommodate the students who would require additional time. I provided one-on-one teaching to a few students who were unfamiliar with how to use search engines and databases. And finally, I allowed some students to conduct the research in their native language and then work with a partner to write the Prezi in English to share with the rest of the class. I did that to accommodate those students because in the class, with the 16 or 15 students, 2 of them had recently immigrated from Mexico and spoke very, very, very little English. So I was trying to get them to really master this research, but they needed some help. So we did that in their native language. I also believe that this lesson, the integrated lesson plan, really meets Standard 1.3 instructional partner. The lesson was created with the special education teacher. I met with the ELL teacher to gain information about the students who struggle with English, and during all parts of the lesson, the special education teacher and myself worked together to assist with student learning. We planned it together, we developed it together, we implemented together, and we evaluated together. We worked as a partner. Ideally, like I said, ideally, it would have been a regular classroom teacher who was understanding of content knowledge, but we didn't have that option. So I worked as a partner, instructional partner with the special education teacher. And finally, 1.4, integration of 21st century skills. During this lesson, the students used the iPads, TPS databases, and other search engines to locate the required information. Students used Boolean logic to assist with the research portion of the assignment. Upon completion of the project, students created a Prezi that was shared to the class and on many of the students' Facebooks. They were excited about this idea. They were excited about a Prezi. They were excited about doing the research by the end, and they were ready to share it and showcase what they had learned. So I had a lot of kids put it on Facebook and then show me their Facebook because they were super excited. The end goal was for students to create a finished piece that they were proud to share with others to promote endangered species conservation. And I think that with the help of the science teacher, we really did accomplish that goal. Part of this unit, I'll be honest, I have very little experience creating lessons outside of language arts. I've been a language arts teacher for 7 years. I knew how to create a language arts lesson plan. But if someone asked me to create a lesson over literary genres, figurative language, I could do that with my eyes closed. But teach science, I had no idea. I didn't know the standards. I didn't know the objectives. I didn't know any of it. As a future librarian, I knew it was important for me to be able to assist all subjects, all teachers. And so at the start of this lesson, while I had no knowledge of the standards for 8th grade, the special education teacher also didn't have any knowledge of those standards. But we were able to come together with a worksheet as a starting point, as a muse, and locate the information with the help of the science department head a little bit to create an integrated lesson plan that provided an opportunity for students to locate, to perform research, to actively be involved in the inquiry process. And the integrated lesson plan provided an opportunity for me to work with science standards, interpret these skills and knowledge, and figure out how can I facilitate learning in a subject that's not English. I believe that when I am a professional school library, I will be able to assist the science department in integrating technology and 21st century skills into the curriculum because of this assignment, because I now have a little bit better understanding of what the difference between a content standard and a process standard is. And so I really feel like this helps me be able to work with other disciplines besides language arts. Now, what would I change? This lesson was hard. I'm not going to lie. This lesson was hard. Teaching this lesson was hard. And the thing that I would change is this right here, the teacher. Who was the teacher? I think that it needed to be a regular content teacher, because while my special education teacher was knowledgeable about the students, she was knowledgeable about the kids' abilities, she didn't know the science standards, and she didn't necessarily know a lot about the ELL kids in the class. So I think when students would ask her about something science related, she couldn't provide an answer. And when they would ask her about research, she also necessarily couldn't answer because she didn't teach research. So I think I would spend some time getting to know my regular classroom teacher before I taught this lesson, but I would make sure it was a regular classroom teacher. And at the beginning, I would also spend some time talking to the teacher to ensure that they actually knew how research should be conducted, and kind of facilitate their own understanding of what the research process should look like, so that they're not just providing content knowledge, but they're also able to provide knowledge about how to research. I think if I had had a regular classroom teacher who was a little bit more knowledgeable in research and the research process and the 21st century skills, this lesson would have been even more beneficial to students. But overall, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about working with other people. I learned a lot about other content and other discipline. So I feel like the lesson was still valuable in my quest for a master's.